Okay, we're live now, right? Joe?
You may begin.
All right. Day and good morning. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, Housing convenes this committee hearing. Today is Tuesday, August 18, 2020, and is now called to order. At this time, it is now 10:09. We're 9 minutes behind. Wow. I would ask my staff, Mika, to take a roll call for the attendance, please.
Senator Joe S. Agustin, Chairman.
Present.
Senator Clint E. Rigel, Vice Chair on Appropriations.
President.
Senator Amanda Shelton, Vice Chairperson.
Day.
Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes, Member.
Gaya Mananasidos.
Senator Jean Biscoli, Member. Okay. Senator Therese Terlahi, Member.
Gratitude.
Senator Jose Pito Terlahi, Member.
Yeah.
Senator Kelly Marsh Titano, PhD, Member.
Esteguitu.
Senator William M. Castro, Member. Senator James Jim Moylan, Member.
Present.
Senator Luis B. Munya, Member.
Gaya.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, there is a quorum.
Thank you, Mika. Senator Rigel, you have a motion you want to present to our committee members?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to allow non-committee senators to participate in this committee on appropriations meeting.
Okay, on the motion to allow non.
I'd like to second it. It's Senator Lee.
All right. On the motion to allow non-committee senators to participate in the committee on appropriations meeting, ask Mika to do a roll call so we can get unanimous by this committee.
Vice Speaker Talena C. Nelson, non-member.
Gaya.
I apologize. Let's start from the top. Senator Joe S. San Agustin, Chairman.
Yes. Yes.
Senator Clint E. Rigel, Vice Chair on Appropriations.
Sorry, yes.
Senator Rigel, your vote?
Yes.
Yes.
I vote in the affirmative.
Okay. Senator Lee?
Hungen Sijosmasi.
It's either aye or nay.
Hungen, aye.
Again, aye.
Senator Regine Biscoli?
She said aye.
Hungen, aye.
Senator Clint Rigel, aye. Chairman? Aye.
Yes. Yes, aye.
Aye.
Senator Tina Rose Munya Barnes, aye.
Hungen.
Okay.
Aye.
Senator Terlise Terlahi?
Aye.
Senator Terlise Terlahi, aye. Senator Jose Pito Terlahi?
Aye.
Senator Jose Pito Terlahi, aye. Senator Kelly
Aye.
Marsh Titano, PhD?
Hungen.
Senator Kelly Marsh Titano, PhD, aye. Senator James Jim Moylan?
Aye.
Senator James Jim Moylan, aye. Senator Luis B. Munya?
Aye.
Senator Luis B. Munya, aye. Chairman, we do have a quorum.
Mr. Chair, I
The
was not
motion
asked to vote, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Mika, you didn't ask the other vice chair, Senator Amanda.
I apologize. Senator Amanda Shelton?
Hungen, aye.
All right.
Senator
Thank you.
Amanda L. Shelton, aye.
Thank you, Mika. My committee members, we have an
motion is
affirmative. The motion is passed. I'd like to invite We have Senator Sabina Perez, we have Senator Tello Titagui, we have Senator Mary Torres, and we have Madam Vice Speaker, Senator Nelson. Thank you. The committee will discuss FY 2021 Budget Bill 282-35 as substituted by the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, Housing, introduced by the Committee on Rules by the request of the Imagahaga Guam, the Governor of Guam, in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam, an act making appropriation for the operations of the executive branch of the Government of Guam for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2021, making other appropriations and establishing miscellaneous and administrative provision. With guidance from our legal counsel, the bill was referred back to the committee on Thursday, August 13, 2020, due to the closure of the Guam Congress building due to a positive COVID-19 contact. This committee meeting will allow us to discuss our concerns on the bill on preparation for our return to session where we deliberate and vote on the measure. Rules for engagement, my colleagues. Questions for the panel will be asked in 2 rounds, and I will recognize you to begin your line of question. There is a 5-minute time limit for questions per senator per round. Amendments must be submitted via email to the committee before the amendment is discussed. Amendments proposed may be discussed but will not be voted on. And senators who wish to increase an appropriation to an agency or department must identify the funding source and provide explanation on the impacts to both the receiving agency and or the defunded agency. I will now recognize the panelists and ask the Sergeant Arms to please swear them in before the committee. We have Steve Guerrero, we have Ms. Llewellyn Terlai, Mr. Lester Carlson, Mr. Edward Byrne, Mrs. Daphne Shimizu, Ms. Melanie Mendiola. I don't know if we got a hold of Gary Hiles. Is he here? No, I don't see him there. So with that, do we have the Sergeant Arms there present? Joe?
One moment, Senator.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes, ma'am.
at this time, because I believe that every individual that's going to testify in these proceedings that needed to swear in, can we just move to waive that in the interest of time because they've already been sworn in for the original budget bill moving forward?
All right, Madam Speaker. As a matter of fact, I'll just remind all the members that are present, you were sworn in during when we had session. I remind you that you're still it still applies to you today while we'll continue with the committee meetings, and that just be reminded you were sworn in. All right, and I think that will suffice for now. All right. Everybody's in agreement, Ms. Shimizu, if you can just wave your hand that yes, you understand that.
Can we
Ms.
do a
Mendiola and so
formal-
forth.
Senator, could we get a second on that? And then also a vote on a roll call vote from the members. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I second that motion.
All right, thank you. Mika, do the roll call then.
Okay.
I apologize,
Senator
Mr. Chair. Can you please repeat the motion before we go into roll call?
Mr. Chair, if I may, then the motion is to waive the swearing in at this time, an original motion and acceptance of the of the agency heads and the presenters that will be answering questions to this August committee has already been done in the opening of the budget session. So a motion to waive the swearing in.
Additional swearing in.
Yes.
So the motion is to waive the additional swearing in. Am I correct? That's really the bottom line.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Does everybody understand that motion? Do I have a second? I think I heard Senator Shelton. All right, Mika, take the roll call. That it's to waive the additional swearing in.
Senator Joe S. and Augustine, Chairman.
Aye.
Senator Joe S. and Augustine, aye. Senator Clint E. Rigel, Vice Chair.
Aye.
Senator Clint E. Rigel, aye. Senator Amanda Shelton, Vice Chairperson.
Ungan, aye.
Senator Amanda L. Shelton, aye. Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes, member.
Ungan.
Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes, aye. Senator Jean Bisco Lee, member.
Again.
Senator Jean Bisco Lee, aye. Senator Therese M. Terlahi, member.
Again.
Senator Therese M. Terlahi, aye. Senator Jose Pito Terlahi, member.
Aye.
Senator Jose Pito Terlahi, aye. Senator Kelly Marsh Titano, PhD, member.
Again.
Senator Kelly Marsh Titano, PhD, aye. Senator William M. Castro. Senator Jim Moylan, member.
Aye.
Senator James Jim Moylan, aye. Senator Luis B. Munya, member.
Aye.
Senator Luis B. Munya, aye. Senator, there is a quorum. Thank you.
No, Senator, there are how many votes?
1, 2, 3, 4. Senator, there are 10 votes.
Thank you, Mika. My colleagues, we will now begin. We have the following folks as Lester's there, right? Correct? Okay, he's on the phone. Okay, there are 3 questions that was posed that I know that my colleagues would like to ask. I think one of them is that do we anticipate the same estimate that the office of OFB and BBMR anticipate for 2021, even with the additional PCOR, the restriction again, we're at PCOR 1. Do we anticipate a change? I think that was asked by Senator Therese Terlahi. And if Senator Therese, if you wanted to ask that, I'd open that up for you to ask that question up front.
Sure, Mr. Chair, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to ask if going into PCOR 1 and the payment for additional pay or any other changes might result in any change forecast for FY21.
Thank you, ma'am. This is Lester Carlson. We don't anticipate any revenue projection changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think there are other questions that we were discussing earlier. I'm trying to pull up my notes right here. So Senator
Mr.
Therese,
Chair?
if you can,
I
please.
wanted to ask, Mr. Chair, if in light of the executive order by the president regarding unemployment, whether we have any projections of how we might pay that and how that might affect our FY21 budget if we need to come up with that money. I would like to come up with that money if that's the way to get these people who are unemployed additional assistance, Mr. Chair.
Lester, do you have a response
yes.
to that?
I have a response, and I'd like Mr. Byrne, sir, to follow up on the response. The governor has already publicly announced or stated that the match for the Trump executive order additional unemployment compensation, the match is beyond our fiscal ability. And we, as much as we'd love to have the additional funding going to those displaced workers, the formula under which we would have to agree to requires funding that we just don't have. And Mr. Byrne, I think there was a number that we had, if you could provide that number.
Yes, sir, if I may. And can I just point out also that the funding would be required in both the current fiscal year and the budget fiscal year. So we would not only have to find these funds partially in this current fiscal year, but also out of the budget that you're now discussing. Based upon the average number of claimants that we're paying out in the fortnightly claims is about 22,000. So based upon that, we're talking of about 40 million that needs to be found in total in order to fund the government share of this, were it to be possible to make this payment. And I would also like to point out that under FEMA rules, we have to upfront the payment and then get reimbursed. And we wouldn't know how much we have to upfront. So that's another unknown in that equation.
Is the 40 million estimate like a total? That's for the year, or what does that reflect?
That's through the end of the year, when the current legislation provides that the unemployment payments go through the end of the calendar year.
To December, first quarter FY21. All right. And 40 million, you're saying, okay. Yeah, I would just like to have a discussion, if possible, as to possibilities. I mean, why we say this, we are unable to find this money. You know, I just hate to cut that off immediately without any kind of discussion on it. Like, you know, could we look at some possibilities?
Yes, Lester and Mr. Byrne, and even Steve, do you have any comments you'd like to provide in reference to that? We need to find ways to take care of our people. That's the bottom line.
Yes, sir. If I may advise the body, we just got notification this morning. It's a similar topic, not exactly the same topic, that the Department of Labor has been awarded another $185 million from the U.S. Department of Labor for continued, unemployment assistance programs. So we are loading that money today. So there will be a continuation of funding for displaced workers affected by the pandemic under the existing program that doesn't require a match. We are in a deficit situation still. It would not be advantageous for us to go out on a short-term borrowing or any other type of leveraging. Plus, between OFB and BBMR, we didn't anticipate any debt service, additional debt service on top of what our projections for FY21 are at this point in time. And it appears that financing this additional benefit wouldn't bode well for us financially. And we did look to see whether or not we could scrape together the cash. But quite frankly, we don't believe that we have enough, even if we were going to forego deficit reduction, which we're kind of, fixated on. But even if we were going to forgo that, we still couldn't come up with the entirety of the estimated upfront cash requirement, as Mr. Byrne had already discussed.
Mr. Chair, may I ask, is this a program where we need to come up the entire amount, or could if we came up with partial amount, would that benefit some of the people? Or does, you know, how would that work?
I'll defer to Mr. Byrne.
Senator, are you asking if, you know, the current amount is $600? Are you asking if a smaller amount could be included in this program?
That, or, you know, if we could cover some people, you know, if that's what you're saying. But, you know, we could come up with 20, let's, for example, could we cover at least half of the people temporarily until we find the other 20, something like that?
I'm not sure under, I would have to go and look, but I'm not sure under the present federal legislation we could discriminate between people. I think you either got to cover the population or not. So I think you would be forced into restricting the amount. But that's a matter which so far hasn't been discussed as a possibility.
What about the 600 amount, Mr. Byrne? Was that a possibility of covering part of it?
The which amount? I'm sorry.
The $600 that you said, is it possible to cover part of it, whatever we could afford immediately?
Well, that's it hasn't been discussed. I mean, I think Mr. Carlson said that we can't at this moment we can't afford any local match because we're already pretty stretched. So I'd advise to step in on that point. But that's just to reiterate what he just said.
All right. Okay, Mr. Chair, my final question on this topic is just the CARES money that you know, of course, you submitted a budget to us, but I'm asking, can that be reprioritized so in order to cover this unemployment amount?
It could be, ma'am, but we don't have $40 million. That the Stafford Act actually allows for us to use that money, but we don't have within the budget that we provided to you and the drawdowns against the budget that have occurred to date. We just don't have that kind of money left in the CARES Act.
What do you have? What is?
Oh, I'd have to get an update, ma'am, because, you know, we did give Gita $20 million. We did do the program in Salapi for $20 million. We are spending lots of money for the quarantine facilities. I think we're in the neighborhood of about $9 or $10 million. So, you know, there's just a lot of big numbers that came off the top. I can probably get you some type of update in a day or so, but again, we did look when this option became available, and with the programs and the commitments that we have already for agency reimbursements for COVID preventative things that we're still in the process of getting people to submit reimbursement claims supported by receipts and things of that nature. We're still in the process of doing that stuff, and the governor has asked us to look at it to see whether or not we could avail ourselves of using that as the local match. But our initial response to the governor was there wasn't enough money to meet the $40 million requirement.
All right, well, we've received the report on the expenditures of that 117 million. We haven't seen which part of that, like the news has reported, is going to be reimbursed by FEMA, such as the hotel quarantine facilities. And so in the end, yeah, how much of that might be available? I think we should know that, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Yes, if we can get that report.
Yeah, Senator Talahi. There will be no FEMA reimbursement for the quarantine facilities. That's a federal fund asking for reimbursement for a federal fund. If it was local funds, then yes, but we cannot ask FEMA, who is to reimburse us for the CARES Act money, which is the exclusive source of funding for the quarantine facilities.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that, because recent news articles seem to go back on that story. So, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. And I think one other question we wanted to know, Lester or Ed Byrne, because we're on PCOR 1, would the hazardous pay apply again that they did the previous months? If you can please explain that and the source of funding and how that's being paid, and what's the estimated amount that's going to be spent out of the CARES funding?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the PCOR 1 doesn't change the amount of hazardous pay that's being paid. Hazardous pay is paid upon exposure to certain conditions. And that has been going on for each week that we've been operating, both in PCOR 3 and in PCOR 1. So the 10% and however, it doesn't. There's no authority to spend the 10%. The 15% and the 25% are being paid where appropriate, as they have been in previous weeks. But there's no proposal to pay the 10% additional amount for people reporting to work.
Okay. I have some of my colleagues that I know they waved their hand, but I have Senator Kelly. You have a question you wanted to pose, Senator Kelly?
Sidus Maasi, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to know from either or both BBMR and DOA, have you looked at what the other territories are doing in this regard? Are they in the same boat as us, or are they finding some creative ways to address this issue?
I'll take the first stab at it, and then Mr. Byrne can follow on. I'm actually following this from a national standpoint, Senator. And while it sounds good, the feedback that I'm getting from the National Association of State Budget Officers chat group, Mr. Byrne is also a member of another very highly recognized national organization. It's one of those things that sounds really good, but you know the economy as a whole is hurting. So where did anybody think that we'd come up with a 25% match? You know, when we still have these issues of reduced economic activity. It's almost like the carrot's right there, but you can never reach the carrot. So it's just a very difficult thing for many of folks nationwide to shoulder. Mr. Byrne?
Yes, I think all states and territories are struggling with this. You know, the states have huge sums of money that they might have to expend, and many of them have already had to subsidize their own unemployment funds even before we got to this point. We're lucky in that we didn't have that issue. And probably in that respect, we're better off than most. But I haven't heard, you know, in my association that there's any state that's been able to deal with this or has a concrete proposal for dealing with this. I think everybody really is waiting for Congress to reach a final conclusion as to how this program will be continued.
Sidus Maasi for those answers. It provides us a lot of context, and you went right into my question was then going to be about how the states are handling this. So has there been any movement in that state national association or discussion with the governor on asking for a waiver, on some proactivity on our part and working with our congressmen, again, to start that conversation, or if that conversation is happening already, to push for a waiver?
I think every state is taking the view that Congress needs to fix or find a solution to this through a different path rather than through this this FEMA, which is kind of it's clumsy, and everybody is struggling with it just as we're struggling with it. So I think all the effort has been really directed towards getting Congress to finally come up with a solution to this that can be funded.
So are we having those communications then with our representative that we need another solution? Are those conversations or letters happening?
I personally don't know about that. Do you, sir, Lester?
From my observation of the national news, the Senate went home without reaching a agreement with the House of Representatives on what's now being referred to as the HEALS bill, HEALS. So all of what it is that you're discussing, Senator Kelly, are forefront in the national minds of Congress. Unfortunately, everybody they just took a break, and I think Congress has a more advantageous program than what the Senate's trying to put together. But as we all know, there has to be a happy medium met and something forwarded to the president for execution. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet. I will remind the body that there's also a 75% reimbursement of EITC, which we hope stays intact and becomes part of what ultimately is passed by Congress and signed by the president.
All right, Senator Kelly, are we good now?
So just Masi, Mr. Chair. So I mean, break or not, I'm hoping that those states are talking with their congressional representatives, and I think we should be pushing those avenues as well. So yeah, but those are my main questions. Just Masi, Mr. Chair.
All right. Now, thank you, Senator Kelly. Madam Speaker, you have a question, and you'll be followed by Senator James Mullen. All right, Madam Speaker, you had a question, wanted to follow up?
I didn't have a question. I just had a comment in reference to a letter that our office had written a couple of weeks ago in reference to the follow-up and the guidance of how we can work and working with the unemployment and the pay there, and also with the hazardous pay, but we still haven't gotten a response yet. And I was just wondering if the administration has done any letters to them asking for any follow-ups on what could be utilized or not.
I don't know if Lester or Ed Byrne can answer that. If there's any follow-up letters if you're familiar with.
I'm aware of some letters that were sent to the congressman by the governor 3 weeks ago, asking him to provide a report by a date certain and some other things related to congressional matters affecting Guam. Don't recall if we got a response, to be honest with you, but then, it's been kind of busy, so my memory may not be serving me correctly. But Mr. Byrne, any news on your side?
No. From a national point of view, I think all the national bodies are trying to concentrate on getting movement in this area. But as has already been said, Congress took a break. Therefore, they're not going to make any progress until they decide to end that break. I'm sure there's a lot of political pressure on everyone in every state because of this. This issue is not just affecting us. That there's a lot of political pressure on Congress to do whatever is necessary. And the bigger states, as I say, are having a really hard time and have had to subsidize their own unemployment funds, even for the regular payment, let alone for the enhanced payment. So, but you may be sure that we'll be following it up on both ends of this to make sure that something we get some resolution out of this, because it's very hard. You know, I agree. It's very hard to know where we're going on this, and it's very disappointing for people not to know exactly where they stand during this difficult time. I completely agree. So I don't think there's, you know, I don't think that the matter is going by, you know, unnoticed. It's a big political issue, and I'm sure it's being addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Moylan, you have a follow-up with Ed and Lester in reference to Senator Reese's questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions were answered on the previous speakers there. Thank you very much.
All right. Are there any questions we would like to pose to any of the panel members before we continue on where we left off during the committee of the whole during session? We ended on page 6 on line 5. Is there any other questions that the folks would like to ask? You can send it on the side chat, so I'll know you have a question. If not, is everybody good? Okay, I guess everybody's good. Okay, Steve, I'm gonna ask you to begin. Oh, wait. I have Senator Lee. You have a question, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if this is appropriate time, but I just wanted to attempt to revisit the revenue section. Specifically, I had some questions for both OFB and BBMR regarding withholding tax revenue.
Yes, ma'am. No, it's appropriate. We're at the committee level meeting. We can go all the way back to page 2 if we need to. We're here to discuss the whole budget bill. So at any time, but I just asked my colleagues, once we complete page, because we ended at 6 on the committee whole, but once we complete, there's nothing on page 1. So we'll go to page 2, colleagues, and then we'll move forward again, because we're all at committee level. We're all going to be discussing it all, and then we can bring up the issues we need to bring up. Senator Lee, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this question is for Mr. Guerrero from OFB. Good morning. Morning, Steve. Just wanted to ask about the methodology that you use to project next year's withholding tax revenue. What actual collections were used, and if you could kind of discuss any economic assumptions that were made. With regard to withholding tax specifically. I'm sorry, Steve, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Go ahead and turn it on, Steve. We can't hear anything, Steve. Joe, check Steve's we can't hear anything.
Okay, try for now. Hello? Can you hear me now? Hello? Yes? Okay. How come we're not hearing? Now I can hear myself. All right, so just hang on. I have a technical difficulty here. If you can hear me, I can hear myself only through my own voice, but not through the. Wait, hang on. Are we good? Okay, here we go. Okay, as we all know, this year is a very unusual year when it comes to collection of taxes, specifically in the tax categories. Withholding revenues, what we did is we took a look at the entire collection for the year, meaning that the first 4 months of the year was an exceptional, were exceptional months, which were basically, I would say, was just normally higher than normal years. So if you look at the collections for the month of October, November, December, and January, they were hovering about maybe almost 21 million a month. Then came February, that 21 million kind of dropped to 18. And then for March, April was, I would say, average about 18.5, and then all of a sudden came May, it dropped down to 15.7. June went back up, shot up to 28.1. And July shot up even higher to 29.6. So what we did is we took the we excluded the first 4 months simply because they were very exceptional months and normally not part of a trend that we would see in the previous years. So what we did is we took the last 6 months and used that as an average to project what we would get at least until the end of the fiscal year to see how it would kind of trend. So if you take the sum of those last 6 months, it averaged out to about $18.8 million a month. So if you multiply that times 12, you get an annual estimate of 225 million for the year. But what we did is we went back and looked at the June and July and seen that those months were a little bit higher than the average 6 months that we saw. And if you took the average of
I'm so sorry, Steve, but if you could just reiterate which 6 months you used, because I'm not sure.
from February to July.
February to July of 2020?
Yes.
Okay, and you're saying that when you average those, you got an average of 18.8?
18.8 million a month. So if you took that average and you multiplied it times 12 to get what it would be an annual estimate, you come up to about 225 million for the year. Okay, so what we did is we looked at it again and says, okay, maybe since June and July months were kind of like high in a sense, which I believe also is what BBMR used to estimate their projection for withholding. That average would have come out to about 20.1 million a month. You took that, you take that and multiplied it times 12 months, you come up to 241 million, an annual estimate. So, you know, we considered the average for the last 2 months, and we considered the average of the last 6 months. And we said, okay, well, we can probably bump ours up, or be average up about maybe 300,000 more a month. So we use basically an average of 19.2 million a month. You take that amount and you multiply it times 12, you come up with an average of 230.5 million. And I believe that is OFB's withholding estimate we would use for 2021. Now, if we were to go back and use historical data, of course, what we experienced in the first 4 or 5 months of this year was an exceptional. We didn't have that type of collection before. So using prior years would really drop the average. Yeah, so, you know, going back, when you look at the actual collections of June and July, just to qualify it, The actual collection for June was 28.1 million. But if you take out the PUA collection of 6.2, you'll come up to 21.8. Sold tuition July, the total collection was 29.6. If you take out the PUA of 11.3, you'll come up to about 18.3 million a month. So it's important to note that you need to reduce the PUA out of these averages, because normally, not normally, but expectantly for next year, we don't anticipate to have the PUA, particularly in these months, or even anything past January. We know PUA is extended to December, but there's nothing to say that it's going to be extended beyond January of 2021. So that's how we came up, Senator, with the 230.5 million estimate for withholding for FY21 for the withholding tax.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Guerrero. And then I'd like to pose the same question that I posed to Steve to BBMR. So Mr. Carlson, if you could educate the committee on what methodology you use to project next year's withholding tax revenues, and what actual collections were used and what economic assumptions were made to come up with the number that you're proposing.
Thank you very much, Senator Lee. I will draw the committee's attention to a two-page handout that I provided last week. Again, at the request of several senators, there was a request for a sneak peek on July revenues. So you see withholding tax, contrary to what Mr. Guerrero said, the actual collections for the month of July were $31,719,026. That was actual collections for the month of July. I also provided the body with a withholding tax collection, and it shows the amount of PUA taken out. And Mr. Guerrero is correct. In July, there was $11 million in PUA, but we still our baseline withholding, and this is where BBMR is coming from. Our baseline withholding is $20 million in July. It was $22.5 million in June. And we are tracking, again, on the same two-page sneak peek of July CRER numbers that I provided to the body last week. We had already collected $219.9 million in withholding taxes with an average of about nominal, easy average of 20 million. Our baseline is 20 million a month. So we feel that we are tracking above what it is that we're asking the body to consider at $235 million. We believe our baseline is a little higher than OFB's. We're a little less than $20 million a month, but very comfortable with requesting the body's consideration upward adjustment from OFB's $230,533,587 to our requested number of $235,533,587, or a net increase of $5 million. I'll remind the body that this year, the withholding tax in the budget was $246 million. So the constant theme of reduction in anticipated revenues kind of resounds throughout most of what it is that we're proffering to you for consideration, with the exception, of course, of corporate income tax, because for the same reasons, and not to belabor what we discussed last week, but again, the same two-page report that we provided to you guys holds true with where we are tracking in corporate tax. I mentioned to the body that we had already collected $91 million the sheet that I provided to you guys, the cheat sheet was $89.9 million. But then as of the date when we discussed this last week, the actual collections to date last week for corporate income tax was $91 million. So we're asking for two things, but it kind of dovetails. But that specifically for withholding tax, Senator Lee, that's how we came up with a number, and that's our methodology. It's based on tracking and a little bit higher assumption on monthly averages than OFB has. I will again state that both of the two areas that we're asking for the body's consideration and upward adjustment are tracking very, very well as of today, but we're still not asking for that level. We're asking for a reduced level in line with being, more fiscally responsible and in light of some of the, ongoing concerns. We don't want to ask for too many things that we can't justify.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carlson. And I'll just go back to Mr. Guerrero. If I could just get some clarification. You mentioned you used a 6-month average and you annualized it. So if I could just clarify, which months did you use? Did you use January to June or February to July? Because you were mentioning that when you did those calculations, you got an $18.8 million average for the monthly. And I'm doing both of those calculations. And if you use January to June, that's a $20.2 million monthly. And if you use February to July, then it's 21.9 million. So I'm just trying to clarify where you got the 18.8 figure.
Okay, Senator, the months that we used to estimate that we came up with the $230.5 million for our projection was based on months of February, March, April, May, June, and July of 2021. Those are the months we used.
I apologize, Steve and Mr. Chair. It's come to my attention that perhaps the live stream has gone offline. So we might want to take a brief recess and have AV figure it out before we proceed, because I don't want the public to miss out on any of this conversation.
Okay, I'm good.
Maybe Mr. Chair and Mr. Meskin, if you can let us know, or AV, let us know when we're back on and we can continue the conversation.
Thank you,
It's
Senator.
coming in clear on channel 21. Maybe just the internet feed, but 21 is good.
Okay. I'm okay to continue, Mr. Chair, if that's okay with you.
All right. Okay. My colleagues were on page 2. Are there any questions that any of the my colleagues have for on page 2?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Mr.
Go ahead.
Guerrero, just repeat his explanation on which months he used.
Yes. The question was, the senator was asking what months we used to determine the withhold.
All right, Senator Lee, we're back on live. Senator Lee, do you still have still need clarification on your questions?
No, but I do want to thank Mr. Guerrero for clarifying that the 6-month average was from February to July and also includes the assumption for PUA. So I'll just keep plugging away on my end, Mr. Chair, and I'll let you know if I have any amendments to offer.
Okay, I see on the side here, Senator Kelly, you have a question you want to pose in reference to page 2. We're on page 2.
second. Since we're looking at this issue, there were a couple other thoughts that I had. It seems that there's some ability to calculate and calculate for the impact of PUA. Is there or has there been any calculation in this regard related to the CARES Act and how it's adding to our economy, and going down the line as well?
Senator Marsh or Senator Kelly?
Yes.
Yes, the CARES Act money, most of the funds, like the Programa Salapi, that $20 million allocation does go out to our fellow residents. And then you've got the GITA $20 million business assistance grant program. And then you've got the monies that we're using for the quarantine facility. So that's collectively around $50 million. So you can make whatever back of the napkin assumptions that at least that $50 million is circulating in Guam's economy as a result of having to take these proactive steps.
So the other part of that would be, I mean, we still have 67 million of CARES Act that has to be expended before December. And then there's the possibility, not that any of us necessarily want to think too speculatively about assistance beyond that, but has that been part of the calculations that the CARES Act money and the PUA will be continuing for those months between October and December? Has that been factored in? For
yes,
BBMR and OFB. Okay, so for
yes,
BBMR it has, and then for OFB, I know you were taking a more conservative approach with the PUA impact. Has the continuation of that assistance been factored into your calculations as well? Or are you eliminating it completely?
Okay, Senator, what we did is we looked at the impact of what of the amount that is known to us today, which is for the June and July. We can assume that the numbers of for those 2 months roughly total about 17 million. And if that's any indication of what the government is basically collecting compared to what has been spent already or anticipate to be spent, that money would only probably be good until the end of the fiscal year and towards the first quarter of FY21. How much of that money, I believe it's $900 some million that's already appropriated to Guam, given to us in allotments, how much of that will be spent by the end of December? We did not factor that in to a certain extent to make any significant changes in our revenue estimates.
Senator Kelly, may I
yes,
make a statement?
Please.
Yeah. Yes. So the recently received $185 million for the unemployment assistance program brings Guam's level to $463,134,341 just from this Department of Labor program. I'll remind the body that we applied for $924 million. We are just about halfway there, and it's August 18th. We are, now that the kinks have been kind of ironed out, it appears that the distribution of the funds and the replenishment of the funds by today's deposit will greatly facilitate, getting this assistance out to those people, albeit, at a reduced rate, but at least the funding is there. So we're optimistically on track to getting the lion's share of the $924 million distributed before the end of the program, which I believe is December. So Guam is doing a good job in advocating for, receiving, and distributing this particular benefit. And I think this is the benefit that has the most impact to our people. Thank you.
Seduce Masi, so we're looking towards between now and December 31st, potentially something around another $463 million going out to the unemployment or through the unemployment program. And I know there's also a training program that's going on for 200 people. So I'm not sure when that program ends, but that's another amount that will be going out. So it just helps clarify for me to be able to get the context of the different types of assistance that we do have going on. So just Masi, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to ask those questions.
No problem. Thank you, Senator Kelly Marsh Taitsino. I'd like to actually allow Ms. Mendiola, if she has something she would like to add with regards to local multipliers versus tourism multipliers. Is that something you can add to the conversation?
Certainly. Thank you. I just wanted to bring up that when it comes to, as you're doing your analysis, tourism multipliers tend to, the research has shown they're right around 1.5, whereas local multipliers, this is the effect of local spending versus the effect of tourism spending. Local spending has a tendency to be a little bit higher at 1.8 or so. So in doing your analysis, you see the most sensitivity in the TAF, in the Tourism Attraction Fund, and it's a little bit harder to analyze the BPT. But it's important to note that if BPT is tracking or is higher than projected or is kind of consistent with last year, then that means that by and large, the local multiplier, it's doing its purpose, which is money's flowing into the hands of individuals through the pandemic unemployment or through other programs. They're then taking that money, they're then spending it, and then that spending is then being reflected in the BPT. Where it's being offset is, of course, retail, tourism-related retail, so your DFSs of the world, some of the businesses at GPO and down in Tumon, their BPT is obviously going to be reflecting as zero, if not, or much, much lower than before. So it's offsetting it. So there's an offsetting effect that you're going to see in the BPT. So as you proceed forward, I think if the objective is in the next 6 to 12 months is, number one, to move people off of unemployment into other industries or sectors, then obviously, strengthening the Department of Labor's ability to be able to place people in other industries such as healthcare, right? In relation to seeking and providing assistance to tourism so that it can rebound quicker than what is currently anticipated. And then that way, those offsetting effects of the pandemic unemployment aid coming in, and it looks pretty good now, but what concerns, I think, Senator Marsh in particular, is the effect in 6 months, right? And so that's where the focus in the next 6 months could be strengthening things that build up that number. But it appears that from what the research that we've been doing at GITA and just kind of in looking at the small business grant and how we can continue to have maximum impact with minimum resources, it becomes how do we make sure that the product that is being sold is as much as possible being it's basically all of the spending is occurring here in Guam, right? So that was all I wanted to add.
Thank you. I'd like to go now to Senator Torres, who had a question. Senator Torres, you're recognized.
Thank you. I don't want to belabor the conversation, but I did send a note to Lester in the WhatsApp chat Basically, I'm just trying to see where Department of Labor is in all of this, since withholding is, typically based on the number of employed, the average hourly rates, and the number of hours worked per week. So, when you look at collections, that's one thing, but when you look at statistics on what employment is versus and unemployment, I think that's part of it. So I don't necessarily need it to be answered now, but I think that it would help to pacify the acceptance of the withholding projections. So if you can just refer to that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Mr. Carlson, any response to that?
I'm looking at the chat and I don't see the message from Senator
I
Torres.
can go ahead and read it. Basically, what she is asking is DOL employment and unemployment reports for past years. Is that factored into this equation? Because if withholding is driven by, numbers of employment, average hourly wages, total hours worked, etc., are historical numbers from DOL employment being factored in?
In a macro level, yes, but it's kind of an apples to oranges comparison sometimes, because there was a period of time when people were getting the $900 a week, but they weren't earning that in their daytime job. And so there was an inflation of income for a length of time that had a truly positive economic benefit on our island. I know that there's psychological issues with, okay, after this runs out, what do I do next? And I thoroughly get it. But the unemployment rate, I don't have anything recent from Mr. Hiles, but when and the Department of Labor, but our unemployment rate, I haven't seen. I just see the same thing you guys see. It's like 28 to 30,000 people are applying for unemployment benefits. And the last I heard, we were servicing around 20,000, more or less, of those people. And we will continue to do so. But I do, I will agree with Ms. Mendiola that this is the time to be able to take advantage of retooling, resetting, and reengaging. And I think that Senator Kelly also talked about the displaced worker program, the 200 positions that are still available, a good amount of them. So we're looking at an opportunity here, Senator Majel, and I hope that we're able to make the best of it. So, but I will reach out to Labor and ask for the latest numbers that they have, because I actually haven't seen anything of late.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carlson. I believe Chairman St. Augustine is back now, so I'll let him take over. But if he's on, I'm not sure. Okay, I think he may be off. So let me go ahead and recognize. Well, Senator Chairman St. Augustine, Senator Perez is next to be recognized. She had a question.
Yes, Senator Perez. But before we go on, Senator Perez, maybe if Mr. Byrne or Lester can answer the question. Do we have the OPA audit report yet? Or are we still waiting a couple more days?
Yes, sir. We're still waiting a couple more days. The audit report is on track to be issued this week.
All right. Okay. Well, we got time. We're on PCOR 1 anyway, so we're good. Thank you. Senator Perez, if you have any questions, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for Ms. Melanie Mendiola. I'm just wondering, are you aware of any forecasting tools that are a little bit more sensitive or perhaps adaptive, as far as like what indicators can we look at to be more responsive to the revenues coming in?
I think the only indicators you can look at are myself, Gary Hiles, I say that only because there's so much conflicting I think there's so much conflicting data out there, and there's not a lot of rules of thumb that you can kind of operate off of. So when I can certainly send you some stuff that we send to when we're preparing our to go out for a bond. We put together something called an appendix that talks about Guam's economy and things along those lines. We talk about things like the biggest ones are GDP, of course, unemployment, but GDP, unemployment, and where the numbers are today with regard to our existing financials. But that's when I think that it's important to be able to tell the story behind it. So when you're telling the story of unemployment, while there may be 30,000 or so that are filing for some version of unemployment, we're not necessarily talking about people that are 100% not working. You're also talking about, in Tumon, it was very common for people to have 2 jobs. So people may be operating on a reduced work schedule, or they may be maintaining hours at one job but been laid off from another, and that's been affecting them somehow. So it's important to understand that, and I think the only way to do that is to talking to the industry, so the folks at GVB, and talking to, and then understanding what that stands for. And then with regard to what's going on with our taxes, I think the most important part is to understand the reports that come out, like the special revenue reports or the careers and whatnot, and then going into the numbers with Mr. Carlson or with a specific agency that discusses that, and then being able to tell that story. Unfortunately, the GDP is a lagging indicator. It's 2019, I believe, is the latest data we have, or I'm sorry, 2018, I believe is the latest we have. And so you're not going to get a whole lot in that one. However, as to the components of GDP, so consumption, that is a proxy of consumption, could be BPT. Government spending or government spending or investment spending, a proxy of that is the number of permits that have been issued, building permits that have been issued. You can see what's going on in construction or what the future is for construction. And net exports, the largest component of net exports, again, in the GDP has to do with tourism. So the TAF is a very good indication of, the TAF is a good indicator of where it's been in the months, that's a good indicator of where it's been. And then talking to the Guam Visitors Bureau, of course, about what their projections are for the future. And so that's kind of, it's a combination of all those things that we utilize when we're talking to bond investors about Guam's economy. And so to understand, it's really just kind of figuring out the story, how to unpack those standard indicators and talk to the numbers or understand the numbers at a deeper level through working with your agencies.
Thank you for that very thorough response. So in looking at retooling our economy, so what are some of those indicators to kind of offset some of the reductions in our net exports?
I think that the biggest piece would be if we can write out the longest, if the unemployment, I think the biggest focus should be figuring out how many people are going, to support 400,000 visitors. These hotels will still need, the hotels still need to be staffed, right? And so understanding the staffing requirements to bring back some of our visitors, not necessarily up at the $2 million visitor level. So how many staff, how much of a staffing level still remains underemployed or unemployed after the 200,000 or 400,000 or so that GVB is projecting? How many remain unemployed or underemployed? And then from there, filling in the dots or filling in the blanks with regard to other industries in our around the island that could need people. So for example, one of the committees that we have at GITA is a healthcare industry committee. And one of the things that we consistently see is that Guam is understaffed with regard to certified nursing assistants, homemakers, and sitters. These are 3 entry-level positions that somebody who works at a hotel could easily fill in. If we can take 200 people and move them into healthcare, or if we can take 100 people and move them into construction, these are all kind of the focus areas to be able to offset the net export, or the kind of as we rebuild tourism. That's at least what Gita is working on. You know, from the industry perspective, the governor obviously is very excited about agriculture, aquaculture. In addition to, we're looking at technology, of course, we're looking at healthcare. And so it's the creation of jobs and the creation of businesses such that we can move unemployed and underemployed into other industries.
Zeus Masi, just one more question regarding the bonds. I guess could I just, if I can get a report on the status of paying down the bond debt for the ones that are budget.
Yes, most definitely. That's available. I'll send you the link, Senator Paris. I can send you the link. It's available on our website. It's called our debt abstract. And our debt abstract does a nice breakdown of, it summarizes all the debt that we have and kind of where we are as far as the schedules for payoff and payoff, et cetera.
Ms. Melanie Mendiola, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does any of my colleagues have any question? I'm looking at the chat here on the site.
I did.
Madam Speaker, I apologize. There you go. You have a question with the business closing down. All right.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking me at this time. When Senator Lee was asking the questions, I wanted to chime in and ask, with the businesses shutting down today, out of the 3,000 plus small businesses and others that are shutting down today because of the impacts and what it's doing with their employees, how will this affect withholdings today? I guess answer from the administration. Did you guys get the question?
Well, maybe I can start you off, and then maybe Lester can speak a little more to the numbers. But I don't think that there's only, according to the Small Business Office of Small Business Advocacy, there's only like 3,000 businesses in Guam, period. And so I don't think that there's 3,000 closing down today. There might be a handful.
No, I'm sorry, not 3,000 closing down. I said there's 3,000 businesses here, small businesses on Guam, and some businesses are closing down today because of the impact. How will that affect our withholding today?
I think it's largely a function of how many employees were employees of those small businesses. So, for example, I read in the news that Travel Pacificana, a travel agency in Hagåtña, was closing. They had 3 employees, I believe it was, and were supported by probably multiple contractors, including like a CPA or something along those lines. So I think it's largely a function of how many employees they're laying off. So if it's 3, it's not to say that it's not significant, but the withholding, I think, is largely a function of how many employees that they will be laying off as a result of their closure.
Mr. Chair, if I may, based on that statement, to date, PUA, or Department of Labor, said there's anywhere between 30 to 35,000 even growing of unemployment today. Somehow, I don't have the exact breakdown. There's got to be a calculation or a formula that's being utilized based on the numbers that we have today. And I just wanted to know if we're looking at a hardball guess on the figures of withholdings. I just wanted to see from the administration's perspective, how do we look at the numbers today?
Yes, I understand your question, Madam Speaker, and maybe the administration can answer the question of, because of the PUA, the employee or the unemployed has an option to choose to have taxes taken there, and that's where there's withholding there's also. So maybe Lester, or because I don't see we didn't get Mr. De Sola here, and then we could get a calculation of exactly how much money is out there. And I think that's what Ms. Mendiola was referring to, is that we have to take a look at the whole. So maybe Lester, could you answer that? And then I have Senator Tello that would like to wave down for a question. So.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Speaker Barnes. Our baseline withholding is about $20 million a month. That is our baseline. Taking out PUA, taking out anomalies, the discussion that we had last week, and then some of the comments that I made earlier today reference some materials that I provided to the body last week. And so our hard number, to answer your question, Madam Speaker, is that we believe that we bring in, on average, $20 million a month. OFB is a little bit more conservative. Those are our hardline baseline numbers. And it certainly equates to more than what it is that both OFB and the administration are seeking the legislature's approval on with respect to withholding taxes adopted for fiscal 21. They're at 230 million, we're at 235 million. But our baseline is a solid $20 million baseline. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Senator Tello, I saw your hand, ma'am.
Thank you,
I see on the chat you have a question. Go for it, Senator Tello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Just following up on the speaker's question with regards to businesses on island. And Daphne, oh my gosh, she left. Is Daphne still there? During the session, I had asked a question regarding the businesses, and what a time to leave. Okay, I'll wait till she gets back because my question is posed to Daphne with regards to information she was going to provide to us during session about how many businesses are still active. Like she mentioned earlier, some businesses still have their license, but they're not active anymore. It's kind of hard to tell, but that she was going to give us data and information on just how many businesses have closed down and how many are inactive. So she's not there on the screen, Mr. Chair. When she gets back, I'd like to pose that question to her. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Yes. As a matter of fact, I know you asked that last time. Oh, there she is. She's back. She's ready to answer that question.
Daphne, were you able to hear me? Or remember during session, we had the conversation with regards to businesses that are still active and some that are actually active, but not active, but they still have their license and they're inactive. And the data you were going to provide to us is kind of show us what you have out there with businesses. Now, it was said earlier there were 3,000 businesses in Guam, and of that number, you know, how many are no longer active? Because you remember, active versus they still have their license is two different stories. So do you remember that question that was posed during session, and do you have that data?
Yes, Senator Tyree, I'm sorry for, I had to step away for a minute, so please excuse me, Mr. Chair and panel. Regarding the number of business licenses, our team has been trying to pull the data. We've had a little bit of challenge because the way that, I guess the data, the way that the information comes across when we pull the data out, it's not clear. It makes it a little bit unclear as to the actual status of the data of the business. What we do see though, ma'am, and I think I mentioned this in the last session, was that you know, there are times that businesses, like the businesses perhaps that may close down, they may not necessarily cancel their business license. So even though you know, we do see some cancellations, sometimes businesses don't come and actually cancel their businesses. But I'm going to follow up with the team. I'm sorry. Again, it's over the last week, the first time that our team was trying to really analyze this data. And, you know, it was a little bit unclear as to what the data meant. So there was some additional analysis that's required. And, of course, that's something I will have to follow up with. So I don't have the data, but that's something I'll follow up with today and to get that for you, ma'am, as soon as possible. But again, reiterate, businesses may not actually cancel their business license. They may continue to have an active business license, even though they have closed down.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Daphne, for that question. We look forward to the data to be provided to us. Thank you.
All right, looking at the site. Oh, we have Madam Vice Speaker. You have a question or two, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Okay, Roger, thank you. This is, forgive me, but I've just been listening to the discussion. And so I just wanted to go back along the lines of Senator Terlahi's question about addressing this unemployment. Now, I know that there has been, according to what Mr. Burns said earlier. And so I'm just thinking, when is the end date for Guam to be able to apply for the Trump executive order that was signed, where we would put 25% of the bill? When is that last date? Do we know? Mr. Byrne, perhaps? I don't see Lester anymore.
Senator, I don't know. I don't actually recall seeing an end date because it's a FEMA. It's actually a FEMA process, so you can apply for, I think it's like a year or two after the incident.
Okay.
But obviously, you'd have to incur the cost within the emergency period.
What do you mean by incur the cost within the emergency period?
Well, FEMA, the whole FEMA process is a reimbursement of an emergency, and the FEMA Stafford Act comes into process when the president declared an emergency. So it would depend upon him continuing that emergency period for whatever period he thought was appropriate in order to continue the FEMA payments. I mean, that's one of the, you're right, that's one of the unknowns about the whole process that we would have to resolve because it's an unclear process.
Okay, and then you said that there was mention of the EITC 75% reimbursement. Do we have a date for that? Of when, or just an anticipated date of when that would be signed by the president?
Senator, Mr. Carlson mentioned that, but I believe that requires legislative change in order for us to get reimbursed. So that was a different process. It would need Congress to enact legislation that would allow us to recover that amount.
Right. And how much would that be?
Well, the EITC that perhaps Mr. Shimzu would like to answer that question.
Daphne, how much would it be if we were reimbursed for the EITC at 75%? Can't hear you. Still can't hear you.
Daphne, can you make sure your mic there? Try one more time again.
You're muted. Now I can go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay, I thought I was on mute, on not mute, but
it's okay. Technical.
I know. But I believe that our EITC amount, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Director Byrne, I believe it's in the $60 million range. That was my understanding. So 60 million times 75% is what, approximately 45 million?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And then how much we have upfront if we were to apply for the unemployment assistance that President Trump signed into the executive order? What is the exact name? Because we're talking about it, but what is the exact name of this unemployment assistance, this additional? Do we know that?
I don't believe it has a name because it's a staff reimbursement.
Okay.
You're pointing out all the difficulties that everyone's trying to deal with.
Okay. So what would be, you mentioned earlier when we first got on that there was an upfront cost that we had to pay. So we were looking at $40 million to participate, but there was an upfront cost that we had to pay. How much would that upfront cost be?
Well, maybe thank you for allowing me the opportunity to clarify that. When you have a FEMA reimbursement, you have to pay 100%, and then you get reimbursed for the 25%. So I think the best way of answering it would cost us about 6.6 million for each payment, but I can't tell you how many payments we would have to front up before FEMA reimbursed us, because again, that's an unknown quantity, and that's why it's a bit kind of scary, because it is unknown.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm just listening to our discussion, and we've had this moment to step away from the budget for about 5 days. And so, during that time, it's just, it bothers me that we're moving, well, not that, it bothers me to see that all of our businesses are shutting down. It bothers me to see that, that we're not discussing really some revenue generators so that we can cut some areas in the budget to come out with some kind of comprehensive plan. And so I'm just hoping that as we move forward, we're looking at these numbers and we're trying to identify the numbers and where they come from and understand the formulas, but also that we move forward and we start preparing for the year after next, because we're moving forward with these numbers, but we're really not discussing what's happening out in our community about people losing their jobs, the impact within the next year. People will be out of the job for a year or two. And so I'm hoping, Mr. Chair, that we can, also try to wrap our minds around that and find revenue generators or perhaps some kind of other alternatives to move forward and come up with some kind of plan that we can present the governor, because I don't know what kind of plan that they have at the executive branch. And perhaps we're going, in the military, we're always told to stay in your lane. Perhaps we're moving out of our lane, right? And so, I hope that we can use this discussion. There was brought up that there's a withholding tax looking to be increased, but we're not discussing what's happening outside in our community. And I hope that, if we can come up with some kind of understanding that for the whole body and the people of Guam, that there is a plan in place, that, that we are looking at our reality now and the impact that it's going to have in the future, and not just, we haven't really been talking about this much. We've just been looking at the numbers and kind of tunnel vision in the numbers and how do we get this budget to pass, but we're not looking forward to see the future impact. So if we can just kind of evolve our discussion moving forward, also addressing the realities that the people are facing today, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice. And yes, that's a very good statement. Senator Peter, you have a question, and I see Senator I see the two Senator Terlai, so we'll go with Senator Peter. Yes.
Re-echo the Vice Speaker's, because I wanted to talk about the EITC, and in the beginning when we started the EITC, we anticipate that we were supposed to be getting like $60 million. And another thing that we have to consider is the compact impact. And we calculate since the beginning of time on the money that they were giving us, they owe us like 700 million. So how do we go about? Do we have to coordinate with our congressman in Washington, D.C., or do we have to just do some kind of legislation right here to force the federal government to reconsider, paying us the 60 million that they owe us like every year and the 700 million that they owe us from the Compact Impact. So how do we do that? Can I get an answer, Mr. Chairman? Are we going to legislate something here, or get a hold with our congressman in D.C. and be forceful in his ways to really tell the feds that we're missing out on a lot of things here, as far as financing. So how do we do that? Do we need our governor to correspond with our congressman, or the legislature, or what?
And that's a very good question, Senator Pido. And we know for a fact that all of us here that are in office today all understood that what has happened on the EITC. It's a federal mandate, not federally funded. Compact Impact is something that we were never called to the table. And then exactly what you're saying, is our congressman going to do something, or back then we had a congresswoman? I think it's a matter of everybody reminding themselves of the role they play. And exactly what the Vice Speaker mentioned, we're used to this in the military. You stay in your lane. And I agree with you 100%, Peter. We need to know exactly where we're going to go and how we need to do this. And that's something that, as we progress on this budget, we start identifying where our shortfalls at, and we keep reminding ourselves, so that maybe we can pass a resolution and maybe convince the governor and the congressman to do what they need to do. Because I know all 15 of us know we need to get reimbursed. We need to get our funding. We need the federal government to come out here and cleaning up Guam with all the contamination.
Mr. Chair, we corresponded with the State Department regarding the money that we haven't received from the feds, and actually there's no response. So maybe we can just call upon our congressman, and let's all get together and do something, because we haven't been getting our fair share of the money from the feds.
Understood. Senator Therese, do you have something you wanted to follow up or in relation to that, ma'am?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Daphne, last week you told us that you had paid approximately 67 million in FY20 for tax refunds. And I wanted to know how much of section, 67 million was paid. All right. And that we still owe, according to your reports, 80 million for 2019 tax returns. But how much, maybe this is a question for DOA, I'm sorry. How much, if we had made the deposits according to the law to the tax refund efficient payment trust fund, how much would have been deposited?
That I'm not sure, ma'am.
Mr. Byrne,
perhaps that is a question for DOA.
Well, the requirement is that the director of DOA and the director of DRT determine what proportion of the tax takings is going to be refunded, and that amount would be the amount that would have been deposited had it been appropriated. In the past, it's been around about 24% of the tax capture. So if you would allow us, we'll calculate that and advise you separately on that.
All right, thank you. And then just to follow up on the discussion regarding how much in CARES money might be available, or other money that might be available. So last week, the director of GITA also estimated that out of the 20 million allocated for the small business grants, there might be $6 million available. And I'm wondering, from the Programan Salapit Adud and Itautau, Mr. Byrne, how much of the 20 million, is there any money available from that? Any money left? I can't hear you, Mr. Byrne. Oh.
Sorry, I unmuted. I muted when I thought I'd unmuted. I apologize. The program Salapi, we're currently in the final process of paying out all these. We've paid out about 17 million out of the 20, and we're still processing some. So I'm estimating that we will have used up about 18 million by the time we finish.
All right, so only about 2 million left, if at best, out of that fund. What about the Ajuda Imangafa? This was the $500 to young adults, and at the time we had allowed for it to be paid out of local funds, which BBMR had estimated there was $4 million available in local funds, or to be paid out of the CARES. How was this actually paid, and what is the balance, or is there? Well, how was this paid, first of all? From which funds?
I might.
We haven't
maybe
paid
I,
anything yet, but I'll let Ms. Shimizu talk about that.
Oh, we haven't paid it.
No, and thank you, Senator Terlahi, for that question. With regards to the Ajuda Imangafa Help for Families program, the law required that DRT submit proposed rules and regulations for the Ajuda program no later than 30 days from the time that the law was passed. The law it was enacted on June 26. August 11, which was last week, Tuesday, was a 30 business day deadline. DRT did submit that proposed rules and regs to the legislature via transmittal to Speaker Munya Barnes. And so we actually just submitted the rules and regs, the proposed rules and regs to the legislative body for review. And we did, though, in our transmittal, advise on certain key points that we believed needed to be addressed. There were several. Regarding the actual funding language in the law, I think that there was language in the law which indicated what the sources of the funding would be. And regarding the actual proposed calculation, based on the actual language in the law, I guess to go back to it, in our transmittal, we did advise that the language in the law didn't necessarily equate to, I think, what the intent of the law was, which is to provide for that gap that was seen in the CARES Act. And that gap that was identified is for those, of course, disabled dependents, and also for those child dependents that were above age 16 but below age 23, and college students. So there was some language issues which we believe exist, and which we advised that would cause the program to cost more than the $10 million that was indicated in the law. But again, that was pointed out in our transmittal.
Okay, so we had estimated 10 million. Is that 10 million available from the CARES money, Mr. Byrne?
I'll let Mr. Carlson respond to that, but it wasn't in the original budget, so he would have to propose a budget alteration to allow that to take place.
We're still committed to fund this program. I think Director Shimizu needs some clarity to be able to better frame the program. And then we'll be able to understand exactly where some of the overlaps and the gaps are that she pointed out in a transmittal that she sent to me earlier in draft. But the commitment is there, Senator Terlahi. We just don't know what we're talking about.
10 million from the CARES, or 4 million from local funds? How are you going to fund that?
Once we find out what it is, we told you that we would take care of it. Yes, we believe that there is money available, but that was limited to about $4 million from the local funds. So we would have to understand what this program is going to cost and where we can get any difference. But
I think you got cut off, Mr. Chair. Ms. Shimizu, were you trying to add on?
Right, and I guess with regards to the estimate, after we, of course, saw the final language of the law, we had tried to do some calculations on our side. The law actually has language that states that the governor has the authority to transfer, I believe, about $10 million, and it indicates sources, but when we came up with our calculation, again, based on the language that was finalized in the law, we believe that the amounts were probably closer to about $20 million in terms of how much we believe this would cost. And that's because there was, and again, we did advise of the issue that although this particular law, and we, definitely agree that, that we would like to make sure that we take care of our people, and we wanted to, of course, address the gap that was left by the CARES Act, and of course not yet addressed by HEALS, which although the Congress is trying to address it through the HEALS, which is again to pay out those individuals or those families who had dependents who were disabled of any age, and then also for those dependents who might be in college, right? Because I know, of course, families who have college age students are still perhaps supporting those individuals, but they were not able to get the benefit of the payment. So one of the items that we identified in our transmittal, which we sent to speaker, was that this particular, the language of again, the law perhaps doesn't exactly equate to the intent, because the way we read the law is that also certain individuals who had already either were eligible for the payment for the dependent because they had already, because they had been paid the 500, or they're eligible to be paid the 500, either they've already been paid for or that they will be paid for, that those dependents that were 16 and under are still somehow included in this particular law. And so, we do have some proposed language to
Sure.
try to address that, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Yes, I understand that you sent a letter with issues regarding the law that need to be clarified. However, I'm just really trying to focus here on the purported funding source that when we passed that, we were pledged that the government had available in local funds $4 million at least, and that if that, or that we were going to be able to find the 10 million in the CARES Act money, and as Mr. Burns said, we haven't seen the budget being re-slated for that money, but I wanted to know if that was available or any balance of it. Okay, so what about, and then there's one more funding source I just want to clarify, Mr. Chair, is so earlier when we were talking about whether we could find the 40 million for this unemployment program to get, the matching, not even matching, the huge amount in federal funds that might become available if we can find the 40 million. I think it was Mr. Carlson who said that even if we use the money slated for the deficit, it would not be enough. And I wanted to know what amount is that, if you could give us the details.
What amount is the deficit?
No, you said that even if we used the money that you are intending to use for the deficit, that it wouldn't be enough to cover the 40 million. So I wanted to know the detail of what amount you're talking about.
The 2-page snapshot that I provided shows that we erased the June actual to collection disparity, and we are up just from July, $29 million. The CRER is being finalized and will be sent around. Sneak peek, we're still looking at ending fiscal 20 from the general fund perspective, and again, not taking into account the shortfalls in special funds, up in the neighborhood of about $20 million. But again, the $20 million, Mr. Byrne, I think we're around $50 million, the deficit.
My question is really yeah, not the amount of the deficit, but how much you said you were considering, you know, whether could be made available to match the unemployment 40 million that's necessary. And I just wanted to know that is.
Yeah. Right. And what I stated earlier, ma'am, was that when we project what we have from a general fund standpoint that might be available, including the commitment already for the bill that takes care of that gap group missed by the stimulus, we're talking about the same pot of money. So we need to understand what it is that is required from the general fund to take care of that gap group of people, and then what is available to be able to put towards a match for the FEMA. And as Mr. Burns said, it's 100%. So we'd have to pay the entirety and then get the 75% reimbursement. And there's just no way we can do that. So, I mean, as it stands right now, our best bet is to ask for, lobby everybody that we know for some type of congressional waiver for that extended unemployment benefits, because nobody has the match. And we certainly don't have the entirety and the time to wait for a 75% reimbursement of monies that we fronted that we don't have budgeted in this year or next year's budget.
So if we were going to clarify how much is available to pay for the Azuda and Mangafa program, you know, are you going to tell us the answer then, how much is available, or are you going to tell us the answer now? I mean, I think we need the answer now. What is the money that you are considering?
All right, Senator Therese and Lester, we're going to go ahead and recess and come back at 1:30. Please be able to get some of the information, Lester and Mr. Byrne and Daphne. And if Ms. Mendiola, if you got the system that, why don't we go in and recess and come back at 1:30? All right, my colleagues? Thank you.